Good morning, everyone. Can I invite you all to settle in? Thank you.
This call is being recorded. This call is being transcribed.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Oh, yes, thank you. We do like that. Should we try that again? Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yay, wonderful. I know it's afternoon, and good evening to those of you who are joining us from other parts of the world. The Martin J. Forman Memorial Lecture is an institution at IFPRI. It has been, in many ways, it is our annual reminder of the critical importance of nutrition and the importance of investing in nutrition as a global development issue. It gives us the opportunity to celebrate the legacy of Martin J. Forman himself, and we'll hear a little more about him and his continuing legacy a little bit later in the morning today. It's also a great opportunity for us to celebrate the lives of those who've dedicated themselves to shaping the field, to making this world a better place for people who deserve the right to nutrition every day. Today is very special because our lecturer for today is Marie Ruel, who has been very much part of IFPRI's own legacy building in nutrition. IFPRI turns 50 next year, for those of you who don't know. And Marie has been with us for many years in that journey. So, you know, today's talk will be about her 3-decade journey of research and partnerships for impact. We have a pretty full agenda this morning, and so I'm not going to take too much time in my own opening remarks, except to say that at a personal level, for me as well, this is an absolute honor because I have been, I think, almost part of all 30 of those years of your journey at IFPRI, Marie, have been with you. So for me, it is a very special moment as well. And, you know, I'll say a little bit more about Marie and her legacy when I introduce her more formally. But I do want to take a moment to welcome all of you who are here in person. The room is filling up. I hope you enjoyed the coffee and healthy snacks. I promise our lunch will be healthy and sustainable as well. In our agenda today, we'll hear from IFPRI's Director General. We're very pleased, as always, to welcome members of the Forman family, Kenan and Sidra, especially welcome the two of you and Sidra's husband, John. Again, this is, you know, yet another way to celebrate Martin Forman's legacy, and we're so pleased that you can join us every year as you do. We'll hear from Dan Sinclair from USAID, a little bit about Martin Forman himself. We'll hear the lecture. Marie will speak for about 35 minutes. And then we have reflections and tributes from a few panelists who will speak about the many different connections and partnerships that are crucial to really to build that bridge between research and impact. So we have a full agenda. We will have time for some questions and answers. So again, I want to thank you all for joining us today, both in person here and online. I want to remind everyone that we are live streaming, and you have many opportunities to ask your questions and share your comments, whether they be on ifpri.org, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, or simply using the hashtag #AskIFPRI on X. I don't think we'll be trending, but do it anyway, and maybe we'll be trending a little bit later today. Without further ado, let me ask Michael to bring up Yo's video. Unfortunately, Yo is at an OECD meeting, Swinnen, our Director General, and not able to join us in person, but we have a video that he's recorded for Marie in advance and to welcome you all. So let's pull that up.
Welcome to the 34th Annual Martin J. Forman Memorial Lecture. Thank you all for being here, both in person and online. IFPRI has been proud to host the Forman Lecture series since 2002, more than 20 years now. The lecture is generously supported by USAID, where Dr. Martin Forman spent a significant part of his career. He headed the Office of Nutrition at USAID for more than 2 decades. He also made critical strides in increasing policymakers' engagement with nutrition issues. He was a key figure in setting up the United Nations Subcommittee on Nutrition and led many micronutrient initiatives, and in particular was successful in bringing in a number of sectors that are integral to good nutrition, such as agriculture, health, and education. I would like to thank very much the Forman family for their continued support and celebration of the legacy of Dr. Forman. They are represented here today by Martin's son, Kenan. This year's lecture is about the role of research in shaping the global nutrition policy agenda, and this within the areas of maternal and child nutrition and nutrition-sensitive programs. The topic could not be more timely. As you know, progress has slowed down in reducing hunger and malnutrition, and at the same time overweight and obesity has increased rapidly worldwide. There is no one better placed to discuss these issues than the speaker of today, Dr. Marie Ruel. Marie's contributions to the field have been immense. She was instrumental in helping to achieve consensus on targeting nutrition interventions on the 1,000-day window of opportunity. In 2009, the US government drew upon the evidence that she and her team published in The Lancet to change its policy to target food-assisted maternal and child health and nutrition programs to pregnant mothers and to children under 2 years of age. In addition, Marie developed and validated indicators to measure child feeding, caregiving practices, and food security. In this way, she led the first systematic effort to develop simple indicators of complementary feeding practices that could be used by large surveys and programs. This work was hugely influential. It paved the way for the development of the WHO's set of indicators for measuring infant and young child feeding practices. Marie's career illustrates the effect that high-quality evidence can have on policies at the international, the regional, and the country level. And this is very important. These policies, in turn, have the power to improve the lives of the most vulnerable segments of the population. They have ripple effects for generations to come. Marie's contributions and career are an illustration of the importance of this and the impact. And as I'm sure Marie will explain, we need to ensure sustained investment in this type of research. We also need to continue partnering across disciplines and across research, policy, and development arenas. It's the only way to transform our food systems and to get back on track towards achieving the development goals. So let me end by thanking you again to everybody in the room and to everybody online for engaging on this very important topic. And of course, a big thank you to Marie herself for her many contributions in this field, the impact that she's had, and her very illustrious career. I look forward to hearing from her.
Thank you, Yo, for those welcoming remarks. Kenan, let me now invite you on behalf of the Forman family to say a few words.
Thank you all for coming, both here and online. We're always super appreciative and look forward to this event every year. And thank you, IFPRI, for hosting this event, and certainly AID for your sponsorship. It's wonderful. Thank you, Director General Swinnen, for welcoming us here. Every year there's a selection committee and everyone is involved in selecting a speaker, and this year it was super easy. Marie has always led this charge, and we were grateful that she agreed to do it. She's been a part of many panels, but I just want to briefly thank everyone. Kelly Stewart also from AID, who's not here. Shawn, who I think is on virtually. Shawn Baker, Mira Shakar from World Bank. Martin Lane Cochran, my niece, who just recently got involved in the selection committee. Marcia, thank you for coming after your 2:30 a.m. arrival. That's great. Of course, Alan, it's amazing. You single-handedly have helped keep us going in this lecture series for so many years, and we're eternally grateful. And then, of course, Purnima, thank you so much, really, for taking over as chair of the committee and all that you do to keep this going. Of course, great to have Sidra here, my sister, and John, my brother-in-law. Martin Lane, Sidra's daughter, is in Pennsylvania on the campaign trail, helping the right side for this election coming. I know we're not supposed to be partisan, but we want everyone to vote for the best woman in the race. Also, my son Noah is on the campaign trail working for a local congressman in our Colorado district, and so they can't be here. And my other son, Sasha, and my wife Virginia can't be here as well, but we're really, really grateful, everyone, for coming, friends and family. And Marie, look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kenan, and thank you for acknowledging and welcoming members of the selection committee as well. Let me now welcome Dan Sinclair. Dan is the director for the Center for Nutrition in the Bureau for Resilience and Environment and Food Security at USAID, and he's going to offer a few remarks on behalf of USAID.
Good morning. So nice to see everybody here today. I want to begin by recognizing the members of Dr. Forman's family in attendance here. It's so nice to see you and to have the pleasure to meet you, as well as IFPRI, and to thank them for the invitation to come and speak here today. Dr. Forman's reputation is certainly well known at USAID, and as I was preparing for today's talk, I took some time to learn even more about his work. Since I have never had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Forman personally, I felt as though I really wanted to get to know him. As a Foreign Service officer and the son of a history teacher, I have learned since day one that context is really key. The more I read, the more I came away super impressed. There can be no doubt that Dr. Forman was ahead of his time in arguing for evidence-informed interventions like support for exclusive breastfeeding, food fortification, and micronutrients. If Dr. Forman were alive today, I would want him to know that his legacy of applying the latest evidence-based interventions lives on at USAID in several very meaningful ways. First, we are doubling down on our support for research-driven nutrition programming as we refresh the agency's multi-sectoral nutrition strategy. In doing so, we are very intentionally setting up consultations with a wide range of stakeholders and institutions representing diverse groups such as research and academia, indigenous peoples, local organizations in the countries where we work, and global nutrition institutions. This is so that we can not only ensure that we hear from as many voices as possible in this important endeavor, but also to give us assurance that we are utilizing the very latest science to inform our programmatic decisions. Just as Dr. Forman saw the important connections between agriculture and nutrition, this paradigm has become part of our very DNA at the agency. Another way in which Dr. Forman's legacy lives on is via our wholehearted embrace of partnership in the bid to end malnutrition in all of its forms. I'd like to think that Dr. Forman would be our biggest supporter if he knew that together with the governments of Japan and France, the U.S. government, represented by USAID, along with several other agencies, is partnering to organize the very next Nutrition for Growth Summit in 2025 in Paris, France. I think Dr. Forman would be elated to hear that in 2021, the U.S. government announced its intention to invest $11 billion in resources over 3 years. I imagine he would be even more ecstatic, though, to know that we had exceeded that amount by more than $1 billion in funding going towards the fight to end global malnutrition. A final way in which Dr. Forman's legacy is still very much alive at USAID is through the Martin J. Forman Nutrition Fellowship. Created for USAID mission-based Foreign Service national staff and nutrition specialists to provide opportunities for professional growth, this fellowship recently hosted the latest cohort, which included 3 fellows from USAID missions in Mozambique, Haiti, and Kenya. Clearly, though, with malnutrition still contributing to 45% of deaths in children under 5 and more than 800 million people going to bed hungry each and every night, our job is far from done. But I can assure you that the cause to which Dr. Forman dedicated his life, that of ending malnutrition in all of its forms, remains our North Star and will do so for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dan. Well, friends, it is really such a great pleasure to introduce Marie as the speaker today. Marie is currently a senior research fellow in the Nutrition, Diets, and Health unit. She started as a research fellow in the Food Consumption and Nutrition Division nearly 30 years ago, which is when I first met her. In that arc, the arc of her career that has gone from research to research, she has built over the last many years. That building has involved being director of what became the Poverty, Health, and Nutrition Division at IFPRI for nearly 20 years. In those 20 years, Marie built a large interdisciplinary team of people who've tackled the challenges of malnutrition from every angle possible, and we'll hear a little bit about that in her lecture. She has remained at IFPRI as a researcher and continues to inspire, to mentor, and to help us become the best researchers possible in nutrition. What you don't see in Marie's, well, let me say a couple more things on her bio, sorry. She has a PhD from Cornell in international nutrition. She received the American Society for Nutrition's Lifetime Award in 2019. If you missed, many of you were in the room. Today's lecture is very different from that one, but that was a very inspiring and moving lecture to those of us who were able to listen to it. For me, what your work, Marie, represents is, really the kind of facets of leadership, and I had to write that down again for myself, that I find to be truly inspirational in terms of what it means to build and to leave legacies that are not just about the work one does, but about the teams one builds, the people one inspires, the institutions one aims and successfully changes in the course of that journey. So to me, leadership is to build, is to inspire, is to support, is to connect ideas and people, to fight for your team when needed, to make us laugh when needed. What you have done for nutrition, not just for IFPRI, but for the world around us, has been truly remarkable. And what's more inspiring than ever to me is that you're constantly questioning yourself, you're questioning us, you're questioning the state of the world as we know it. And I think that provides a certain energy of leadership that is what inspires researchers. So to me, I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. I did have a little preview some weeks ago, but I know you've been honing this lecture for weeks. And I know you're going to challenge and inspire us again as we continue to think not just about the future of IFPRI, but the future of global nutrition research. It's been the greatest privilege of my life to be mentored by you, and I'm so pleased to be able to host you again. I'm going to try to not get emotional, and you're going to try to do the same thing, and I invite you to deliver the Martin J. Forman Memorial Lecture. Thank you in advance.
That will give me a little time to recover. It was just, okay. Hello, everyone. I hadn't seen the room yet. It's really nice to see all the friends and colleagues. So I just have to figure out the technology and everything is fine. So it is a real pleasure for me to be here, and good morning to people here and good day to everyone listening online. And it's a pleasure for me to be here on this side of the Forman Lecture. I'm really humbled and very honored to have been invited to give the lecture this year. I was not sure that I was up for this, but I think it's such a wonderful opportunity, and thank you to the committee for offering me this lecture. So I have also to admit that I have not met Dr. Forman, and really this is a sad thing in my life, especially since we've been talking about him so much over the years. And I can't blame it on being too young. I just haven't had the pleasure to meet him. But I've met his wonderful family over the years and seen the children grow, and I've listened to all the inspiring lectures that recall on how Dr. Forman did indeed influence their work and their personal career. So, and what I will be talking about today is a review of my take on the role of research in shaping the global nutrition the global nutrition agenda. So I will look at how research can inform, shape, influence, and try to summarize my views on that, and how we can influence policy and practice through research, but also how how policy can affect research and how research can affect policy, and really help asking the right questions when it comes to research. So I will start with talking about how can research help shape nutrition programs and policy. Did we have impacts, and what challenges did we have, and where are we now, and what are the new challenges? So I will start with the first question, and for that I have 3 case studies to report briefly. And to my great surprise, Yo actually talked about the first one, but I'll give a little more detail, maybe more than you would like. So this is the study from Haiti about food targeting for nutrition impacts, and I worked with Purnima Menon on this. And in early 2000, USAID was spending about $100 million on development food aid, and Haiti was a big recipient of food assistance. And the Haiti mission started to ask very good questions like, does all of this food assistance actually have an impact on children? And even more importantly, should we continue to deliver and target children once they become malnourished, or should we try to prevent malnutrition with this food aid? And so the idea of our research was to look specifically at that question. And so they used to try to treat malnourished children that were between 6 and 59 months of age. And the prevention was to just provide the food to the children, the food and the program, to households that had a child that was 6 to 23 months old at a time when they really are very vulnerable and likely to fall into nutrition if nothing is done. We had great partners, USAID, of course, and Fanta. And World Vision Haiti was an incredible partner for the implementation part, and Cornell University. So the study was a randomized controlled trial. You'll hear a lot about that today. And so this is the rigor in evaluation. We had a 3-year follow-up between the baseline and the end line, and we compared the 2 groups, the group that received the recuperative model, the traditional one, and the group that received the preventive model. And you can see that we found the blue bar is the preventive model, and we found that at end line, the prevalence of undernutrition was significantly lower in the group that received the preventive model. And the reason why I chose this study is, first of all, because this was the first study that showed the impact, that showed that prevention is actually more effective than treatment. It was way back then. We didn't have that kind of information. And it was also the first study that tested targeting the first 1,000 days, and it actually worked. And even the 1,000 days was not yet quite in the language, but it was coming. The study came out at the same time as, well, it came out in the set of studies published with the Lancet series, the first Lancet series on maternal and child nutrition in 2008. And the series was really emphasizing the importance of the early days, but it wasn't calling it 1,000 days. It just took a couple more years for it to become the 1,000 days, and now I'm sure everybody knows about the 1,000 days. This is why I chose the study, because I thought it was a timing issue, and timing sometimes is really important. We don't always realize that, but I think the study had impact because of the timing of it. So the next study I will talk about is social capital. It's a study in Mexico that many of you probably heard about, the famous Progresa program, which changed name many times in its life from 1997 to 2019, but lasted for 22 years, which is a really long period of time for this kind of programs. And the Mexican government asked IFPRI if we could evaluate this program. And so I will always remember, I was in Guatemala at the time. I was working with Bénédicte de la Brière on this project, on another project, and Lawrence had calls and said, could you hop on in Mexico and go visit the government? They would like to evaluate this program. It was like, oh my God, yes, we will go. And we were so impressed by the government people we met, which is not always the case. And by the program itself. The program was a program that was giving cash to people on the condition that they would send their children to school and keep them in school, and they would send them also or take them to preventive health services and to nutrition services. And the program had a women's empowerment component, so it doesn't really get better than that even today. So we discussed with them, and we were very enthusiastic about the program, but then they also said, but we want a rigorous evaluation. We want, you know, those randomized trials. And you're like, okay, I've never heard that in the mouth of a government person. And it was going to be a big program and a big evaluation with a baseline and end line, so it was just a perfect world for us and very, very surprising. So we found a lot of impacts with the somewhat pilot. We had a range of positive impacts on most of the outcomes that they were interested in. And so here, why I choose this study is because it was the first large-scale evaluation of a social protection program that used such a rigorous design. And the program itself was really insightful with this focus on human capital formation. But the evaluation, of course, was good because we did it. And so it was a perfect little package. We also, I felt, this program helped create a culture of rigorous evaluations of complex social protection programs. So other countries were starting to reflect more about the design of their program, but they also wanted an evaluation as well. And so I think it really had a ripple effect, a beneficial effect. And we had an evaluation in 2010 done by Jerry Berman, who reports that the evaluation played a role in the sustainability and the expansion of the program. And so that's also very important because certainly according to the evaluation, the fact that this program lasted for 22 years was related to our evaluation. I'd like to mention also that Santiago Levy, who was part of the team there, actually a very important part of the team, he was Undersecretary of the Ministry of Finance when this program was designed, gave a wonderful Forman lecture in 2009, and I really highly recommend it. It's a wonderful story that he tells in a very relaxed way. He was not nervous. So my third example is about achieving impact through a portfolio of research and strong partnerships. And here I'm going to refer to a portfolio on nutrition-sensitive agriculture. This is not a one study. It's really building a body of studies and a body of evidence. But before I do that, I just wanted to talk about the nutrition-sensitive portfolio that we built in our division at the time. And it was not just agriculture. It was really a very complex set of nutrition-sensitive programming portfolios, starting with health. So we worked on health. Purnima was leading this portfolio in India and South Asia, and Jeff Leroy was leading with the rest of the world. Dan Gilligan was here, was leading the social safety nets and still is. Aulo Jelly, who's also here somewhere, was leading education. And in agriculture, Diana and I were leading. And what I wanted to emphasize, and there was also, the nutrition sensitive policy group, which was led by Stuart Gillespie. And what we have at the middle of the figure here is Agnes Kisumbing, who impregnated all our programs with her wonderful work on women's empowerment and really made us all get on the wagon and include in our portfolios strong components of women's empowerment and equality. So one little thing I wanted to mention, and I don't know if you can read, but agriculture and nutrition is not new at IFPRI, was not new when I came in '96. And one of the first reports that I saw was the one from 1984, which was co-authored by Per Pinstrup-Andersen, Alan Berg, and Martin Forman. And actually, Alan is with us today, and I did not know before I checked this slide that Dr. Forman was also working on agriculture and nutrition, had I known. So the journey, quickly, I will go through the steps because that's exactly what I would like to describe is how we build those portfolios. So the journey starts with identifying pathways of impact, and in this case, it was nutrition-sensitive agriculture. And that part of the journey is very important so that all partners kind of agree on what exactly we're trying to do with these complicated agriculture programs. And I'm taking this example here because it's an example of a pathway that we tried to adapt to who we were talking to. So Melinda Gates became interested in agriculture for nutrition, but through the pathway of women's empowerment. So we created this particular pathway to have a learning session with her, and Shelley Sundberg and Laura Burks had invited me to participate in that. And other groups would want other pathways, and so we also tried to work with them on clarifying these pathways and illustrating them so that everybody is on the same page. We also worked with partners on developing guidance material. That's also very important that the different partners had their own guidebook on how to design and how to implement these programs, and we worked to support them on that. And then we had partnerships. This is engagement in research and partnership. This is really the most important packet of things in order to build that portfolio. So that's what I want to emphasize a little bit, but we start, of course, with the diverse research portfolio where we study over and over, but in different contexts, and we use different designs and different interventions and outcomes. We use rigorous impact evaluation. I don't even need to mention that, but we not only look at impacts, but we look at impact pathways, and that turned out to be extremely important also in terms of understanding what are the things that prevent these programs from having impact, and what can we do to improve those pathways. And we tested and standardized and shared tools and methods. So that's the usual way we do these things. We also engaged and nurtured a series of, decades and more in partnerships. And I certainly want to mention that, one of the partnership I've been involved heavily in was with Keller International, and Shawn will talk to partnerships as well later on, but this was a strong partnership that really did very, very good work, and I want to thank as well Victoria Quinn, who was instrumental in the success of that partnership. There was a lot of respect and support of each other's work and role in doing this work. At WFP, we also had a relatively long-term engagement with them where we worked at helping them reshape their programs to make them more nutrition sensitive. That was something they were very keen on, and they asked for our support, and Diana Olney worked on this with Aulo as well, Aulo Jelly. The engagement with governments is a whole other story, and we have an example in Bangladesh that I will detail a little bit more later, but in Bangladesh, our biggest asset has been that we've had Dr. Akhtar Ahmed, who has been in that office for almost 3 decades, in and out, but mostly in, and is still there as country director, and that has made an enormous, this long-term presence is really the key to engaging with governments in a significant way. In India, Purnima has also led a program called Poshan there, and that's probably a decade plus of engagement with a whole with a large group of stakeholders, including government, in a program that is called Poshan, and is now operating in the region under the leadership of Rasmi Abula. I lost it had to happen. Okay. And in Ethiopia, Dan has been leading some work on nutrition-sensitive social protection, so sensitive productive safety net, and has also had long-term relationships with CARE and World Vision, and they've used the research to improve the program over time and change things. So those are all examples. There are a lot more that I wasn't directly engaged in, but this is a very, very important aspect of our work. We have also had the support of donors that have been consistently really working, and they still are. I named the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, FCDO, USAID have been very supportive in this area. Finally, on communication, of course, we've contributed to a lot of the communication of the findings, the experience, the learning. We organized and engaged in conferences and workshops, all the things that researchers do, but in partnerships, again, with program implementers. And between 2012 and 2022, the work that we were doing at the time was incorporated into the CGIAR Agriculture for Nutrition and Health program, which really helped broaden our reach, our partnerships, our country focus, and achieve our impacts. This program was led by John McDermott. Now, to reflect on our experience, this is the last step in this really important journey. And I just wanted to spend a second on that or two. We basically, of course, reviewed the evidence. Once you've done a lot of work on the topic, we've reviewed the evidence and we reflected and we changed our mind. And that got some people very surprised or a little upset with us. But, you know, this is the iterative process of doing the research, looking at what you found and really having to move on to maybe something that contradicts what you said before. And we were very humble about it. I think we just did it and explained that the evidence was there, not just from our research, from the body of research. That evidence was telling us, you know, change the way you target these programs and the outcomes you look at, and we did that. And I wanted to also highlight a document that I found recently, which is from CRS. And this document is a new document that really has adopted all of the recommendations that have been made recently on how to shift the agriculture and nutrition programs. And I was very impressed because they have really adopted these recommendations, and they don't call their program nutrition sensitive agriculture. They've moved to leveraging agriculture for better nutrition and diet. That's a very important distinction as well. So moving on, did we have impacts? And yes, I keep losing my mouse, sorry. Did we have impacts, and what are the challenges that we faced? And this is a very difficult question to answer, and I will do my best because it's always very difficult to attribute impact from research on action or on development or policy, but we tried. And I'm showing this picture because this is really a picture that highlights our strong engagement in Bangladesh and how it has facilitated our direct communication with high-level members of the government in the country. Here you see 3 members of our team who are with Dr. Chowdhury, who was at the time in 2021 the Speaker of the House for the Bangladesh government. And the meeting was to offer her and discuss with her the new book that Dr. Ahmed had published, our country coordinator I talked about. And my reaction when I saw this picture was to say, well, I'm sure the team invited itself to go visit the minister, But she said yes. It's good, and we may try to push our work to the policymakers, but they don't necessarily invite us at the end and have a session with us. And to me, that was really a reflection of the genuine respect for and the interest in IFPRI's work from the government of Bangladesh. So on the did we have impacts, my first point is that I think we had impact. And when I talk about we, there's no we, just us here. It's really the larger community. Collectively, we had impact on supporting and shaping the evolution of the global nutrition agenda, for sure, collectively. And we have managed to take nutrition-sensitive programming from theory to practice. We've influenced and changed the way development programs are designed and implemented. This is a major shift from many, many years ago, how the programs are now really multi-sectoral and have nutrition-sensitive approaches. And I think we, again, collectively changed the narrative on nutrition-sensitive programming. And so we went from the 2008, the time when we published a Haiti study, where this framework was a framework developed by UNICEF in 1990 and was adapted for the first Lancet series. And it is a good framework, but it shows the determinants of malnutrition. And it shows the catchy food, health, and care, and the fact that some causes are immediate, or underlying, or are basic causes. But we went a lot further than that in the 2013 Lancet series, where we now have an action-oriented framework, a framework that in the different boxes that you see that tells us what to do. And what the outcome is not malnutrition, it's optimum nutrition. So this was really a change in the evolution of the thinking about, it's nice to know what the determinants are, but what should we do? And so that's what we should do. And I contributed to the nutrition sensitive program chapter in that Lancet series with Harold Alderman, who is here, and Stuart Gillespie wrote, or was first author of the paper on policy. And so we did certainly have some impact, but it was, of course, a group work. And I think this was, for us, this framework was what really put wind in our sails. We just ran with it and did a lot of development, a lot of nutrition-sensitive programs of all sorts. Now, we also, I think, had impact on creating a culture of research to support program design, which there's always been some, but I think now there's a lot more demand for the research, especially when we do the implementation research or the formative research to design the programs and et cetera. So I think that's also collectively with all of the other groups that do research that we've created this culture, which is to support program design and implementation and document impacts and impact pathways and cost effectiveness. We contributed also to the multi-sectoral approaches idea you've seen the Lancet series in 2013. From that point on, it was clear that multi-sectoral approaches were very important. And interestingly, multi-sectoral programming has been going up and down in the history of nutrition. And I think now it's there to stay. I don't know how we can now move away from it again. And then did we have impact on policy and practice? And as I said before, this is where it gets very tricky. Impacts on policy are a lot more difficult to measure and to document and to assign attribution and all of that. But I have a little story here about Bangladesh again, where you get to see Dr. Ahmed with the pink tie, the red tie. And this is in 2012, the inauguration of the Agricultural Policy Support Unit, which was funded by USAID. This was, you see on the left side, the Richard Green, who was the mission director there. And on the right side, the lady is Mrs. Chowdhury, not the same one as I've presented before, who was the Minister of Agriculture, cutting the red ribbon. And next to Dr. Ahmed is another minister, Minister Razak, who was then Minister of Food. So this is really a very official celebration and all of that with high-level officials. But this policy support unit has really done a lot of very good work. And one of the programs that they've designed with the government, with the Ministry of Agriculture, was a pilot project on nutrition and nutrition-sensitive and gender-sensitive agriculture, which we led in collaboration with Helen Keller International. This was the first randomized controlled trial that the government ever, of course, governments don't tend to implement the randomized trial, but it was very impressive that the government was implementing the program. And the program had nice results, it had positive results, and it was to be scaled up, but COVID came, and of course that changed the priorities a lot. And now the government has changed, and so although it was very high on the agenda, it probably is not as high now. And that talks about the fragility of counting on impacts on the policy, because things are not very stable. Okay, where are we now? So that's the last part. When I think of where we are, I think of this framework, and most of you probably have seen this framework. And basically what it does is it shows how food systems, basically the purple steps in the food systems that are into the food system and where food environment encounters those steps. And at the top, it shows the other broad systems that also influence food systems, and at the bottom, the policy and governance in orange that affects everything. And one of the things about this framework is that it now brings us to having diet as a main outcome of these processes. So we've talked about nutrition a lot and the nutrition outcomes, but now we have diets right there. And that's a good change for us. And we also have the indication of how diet relates to nutritional status. And you can see that diets affect nutritional status, but they're not sufficient. We also need the contribution of the other sectors. Here in green, the ones I've talked about before are needed to improve nutrition. So where are we? Again, I'm not going to give any details of the crises, the many crises that we are facing, and the many challenges that like we've never had before. The world is very different now. We also have multiple forms of malnutrition, as you all know, and this is not only in some select countries in transition. Multiple forms of malnutrition are everywhere, including in the US, of course. We have a problem of poor quality diets, of course, that affects the multiple forms of malnutrition. Massive problem of poor quality diets. The unaffordability of healthy diets has been revealed a few years ago with some research, and they continue to track this information, and it's about 3 billion people cannot afford a healthy diet. So this is really out of control. The food industry is also kind of taking advantage of this situation and releasing more and more cheap foods that are mostly unhealthy. So, you know, we do need to focus on all forms of malnutrition. We do need to also scale up what works. We have some things that, some types of interventions that we know work that are implemented, but really not at scale, and that includes breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is a double duty action in the sense that it prevents all forms of malnutrition. Micronutrient, multiple micronutrient supplements in pregnancy also should be part of the interventions of known efficacy that should be scaled up. Large-scale fortification is so slow in low and middle-income countries. It's very hard to see that we are contributing with these kinds of interventions, and we should. Of course, we need to educate and support consumers, and this is probably the hardest thing to do. Nobody knows how to do effective nutrition education, or whatever you call it, behavior change communication. We're not good at it, and we're not good at changing behaviors. We need to reverse the tide also on the unhealthy food environment and restrict marketing of unhealthy food. So that's a big agenda, but this is just a snapshot. It's my final slide in case you're really bored. My concerns, that's going to be lively. So yes, in the Forman Lecture, we're always encouraged to have unconventional views, so I take the opportunity to do that. And I was not unconventional until now. So when I think of the food system world we're in or where we are in now, I just see a lot of talks, a lot of meetings, a lot of reports, a lot of position papers, all very good reviews. I'm amazed by how well people write about those things, talking about engagement and partnerships and all that. This is important because we need to sort things out, but there's a lot of that, and it's hard to find where is the research in this literature, and I'm still looking, but I did want to be positive and highlight some research that's really useful. We at IFPRI have, of course, I'll say that, the best modelers. And the modelers are in heaven with this situation now. They are doing so well. They are very useful. Their models are in demand and are there to explain economy-wide impacts of different variations in policies. There's also been recently a much better research than for a long time on measurement of diet. We really have simplified. We now have simpler tools to measure diet, which is good. We also are trying to develop tools to measure food environment, and this is a lot more difficult. You imagine food environment is so complicated. This is where you shop. This is where you buy your food. And there's so many things you need to measure, and I don't think we have done very well yet in developing those famous toolkits. We're struggling. I appreciate the research on the cost of healthy diets. I think it's been very useful, and FAO is now tracking the number of people that cannot afford a healthy diet yearly, and I think it's a very good indicator. It gives us an idea of how terrible the situation is. It doesn't give us a solution yet. There's a lot of talks about innovation, and innovation means what can we do to improve things? Let's say in food environments, what kind of intervention would work to improve people's diet? And what I've seen in this area, though, is that there's really limited evidence. There are small studies that are mostly small studies that are done in food environments or in trying to improve decisions about food choices and diets. But it's really challenging to do these studies because we don't have a gold standard method to evaluate like we do in the randomized controlled trials. We can evaluate these little interventions, but then we don't know how that relates. What is the impact of that new innovation in all of the food system because of the interconnectivity of all the pieces of the food system. So it is not easy, and we don't have the skills really to analyze systems that way, I think. I don't have the skills. So we have a big challenge there about the methods and how are we going to analyze food systems that are so complex, and when you modify something at this stage, what happens to the outcomes at the other end. Where do programs fit was also always my first reaction when I looked at the conceptual framework. There's no programs in there. So how do we bring them back? And programs have lost a little bit of glory. Corina and Hawks worked on a paper that was released in 2020 on the multiple duty actions, we call them, how to have actions that address all forms of malnutrition or multiple forms of malnutrition at the same time. And this really didn't have much impact. The paper has not had much impact, but also, more importantly, I don't see that people are talking or doing double duty actions in programs yet, and I think it's pretty urgent that we do that. And so that brings me to the final point, that is, I think we need to think very carefully about how we train people to work on food systems, especially in the nutrition field, because we really don't work on systems. And it's daunting to look at what we have to analyze when we work on food systems. And so that brings me to a point that Alan Berg has made many years ago in 1993 about the nutrition engineers. At the time, it was, he was saying we need nutrition engineers, we need to train nutritionists to deliver programs, operational things, and people are not trained that way. They're not trained to make decisions on the spot, and if the food aid is not coming, and I think here we have a similar situation that I don't know if it's nutrition engineers necessarily, but we need to rethink the way we train people if we're going to move and adopt the food systems framework forever after. And so this is my last slide. It didn't work. So, yes, I want to thank everyone that has been in my division since 1996. That's an awful lot of people. And this is just a snapshot that I had just before COVID. This was our team. And I see a lot of people in the room that are not there because they're new. And so, anyway, I want to thank everybody in that have crossed my division over time and that has stayed and with whom we have worked and did fantastic work. And I also want to thank all the children we weighed and measured and their caretakers. And I chose that little girl because she was not crying when we weighed her. That was unusual. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marie. You guys can clap a little more. Thank you. Thank you. What an absolute, tour de force of, this journey of going from research to impact. I'm really struck by the fact that every single slide on there was many years of work. And, I think people constantly underestimate what it takes to deliver quality work. We're going to move to first Patrick, a special video from Patrick Webb, who could not be there with us today. So I'm going to ask Michael to bring that up. Patrick is currently Chief Nutritionist at USAID, but he has known Marie as a researcher for many years. And we asked him to reflect a little bit on the future of research as he sees it, particularly starting where Marie ended, which is the future of research in a systems view. So let us pull up Patrick's video. And then I will call our panelists up.
Hello, everyone. I apologize for not being there in person. That's my loss. But I'm very grateful to have been given an opportunity to participate, however remotely. So congratulations, Marie. I was able to see your slides ahead of time. Really enjoyable. And I was asked to comment on future research priorities as they relate to food systems. So I'm just going to take a couple of moments to talk about three priorities that I see from micro, meso, up to macro level. At the micro level, or at least the element that we're looking at, I would talk about shifts in the geography of mycotoxin contamination and the relative contribution of mycotoxins to suboptimal birth outcomes, obviously in the context of climate change. What that means, for example, is that certain aflatoxins, natural-born, food-borne carcinogens, high levels in the blood of pregnant women, has been shown to be correlated with certain suboptimal birth outcomes, like low birth weight in some contexts, in others, small for gestational age. And those outcomes in turn have been correlated with growth impairment of children. SDA in particular, in the Lancet series 2013, was correlated with about 30% of stunting by the age of 3. And in the context of climate change, we're seeing aflatoxin contamination, other mycotoxins, fumonazins and so on, moving north and south of the equator but even in the tropics are moving into areas unfamiliar with and unprepared for emerging diseases that affect not only crops, but foods and their consumers. So that's important because in terms of the relative contribution or the relative risk posed by this contamination problem, I can speak to work by USAID's Nutrition Innovation Lab in Nepal, which showed a significant correlation between aflatoxin in the blood of pregnant women and birth outcomes. And therefore, as this moves, we need to be concerned about new women being exposed. But in terms of relative risk, in Nepal, low maternal stature and smoking were higher risks to impaired birth outcomes. But as you move into populations maybe where smoking is less of a problem or maternal stature is less of a challenge, then the relative contribution of mycotoxins to these birth outcomes and nutrition could become more significant. So what is happening? What can we do about it? What are the policy level and programmatic solutions that we can apply? At a meso level, I would focus on something that is close to Marie's heart, trade-offs across bundles of policy instruments to enhance diets and nutrition. That may actually include the need for research on appropriate methods, something that Marie has been long involved with. It's hard to establish controls and counterfactual situations where you have complex multi-sector interventions aimed at improving diets and nutrition, but have been tailored to different contexts, even in the same country. So it's increasingly accepted that we need to look at socio-technical bundles, as often called, working together, generating synergies across a variety of things, technologies, policies, practices at the field level. These bundles can often achieve more for nutrition than one or the other, but which bundle? Now, Marie talked about bringing together actors from multiple sectors. It takes a lot of intentional effort to achieve that, but it has to be done. And often to achieve it, you need credible forms of mixed methods evidence on what works, net as a package by context. A very big ask, but one which we can't shy away from. And then finally, at the macro level, I think we need to account in much more detail to enhance the discussion on the contribution of diets to climate change, account for non-farm but food system-based contributions to greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, the cost effectiveness of different approaches to tackling emissions before the farm and post-farm gate. You know, fossil fuel use in food refrigeration and transportation, which is essential for protecting perishables, cutting methane from food loss and waste, emissions from the transformation of crops, the processing of crops into food products, and so on. I think we need to bring a lot more of our research thinking and firepower to being involved directly in understanding the challenges and bringing solutions to bear to the climate agenda. I'm hoping that Marie will stay involved in one way or another in all of these kinds of operationally and policy relevant research. The world needs her, needs everyone to continue to focus in this space. And these are the kinds of things that Marie has dedicated her career to in the time-honored path of Marty Forman. And so thank you, Marie, and with that, thank you all. Bye.
Change locations a little bit now. We have a sort of short panel now of people who will offer some reflections on some of the areas that Marie touched upon. So I'm going to invite and see if we cannot get our online panelists on and invite Omar, Dary to join me here. Please do save your questions because we will have some moments for questions and put Marie in the hot seat when we do that. Great. Welcome, Shawn, and welcome, Namukolo. Let me briefly introduce each of our panelists. Shawn Baker, previously Chief Nutritionist at USAID, has had a long career at Helen Keller International and has been quite a partner of IFPRI in that he is currently Chief Program Officer now again at Helen Keller International. Welcome, Shawn. Namukolo Covic is the Director General's representative in Ethiopia for the International Livestock Research Institute and the Interim Deputy Director of the CGIAR Better Diets and Nutrition Science Program, a large portfolio program that the CGIAR will be implementing in coming years. She has had a long history of work at the intersection of agriculture, food systems, and nutrition, and has intersected a lot with Marie in that role. And last but not least, Omar Dary, who's a senior nutrition science specialist in the Bureau for Global Health at USAID. Omar has known Marie as well for many, many years, since her days in Guatemala. So really looking forward to what each of you will have to say. I'm going to first turn to you, Shawn, and ask you if you could offer some reflections on the partnerships aspect of what Marie mentioned, especially on building effective partnerships for research between implementing organizations and research organizations like ours and many others around the world to test and scale high-impact nutrition interventions. So your remarks, please. Maybe about 3 minutes or so. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks so much, Purnima. Hello, Marie. Very sorry I'm not there in person. I'm fortunate that I actually got to see you, Marie, last week. I was reflecting on when I actually first met Marie Ruel, and it was actually in Marrakesh, an International Vitamin A Consultative Group meeting in February of 2003. And because it was in Morocco, there was a Morocco Day where Marie and I both happened to be presenting. And I think from the get-go, I know on my side, it was this evidence-based coup de foudre. And I felt Marie has been one of my essential co-conspirators since then. And it's just been an absolute pleasure, privilege, inspiration, and always challenging in the best intellectual way part of my work since then. I would start by positing that I think we know so much about what to do to fight malnutrition, and that gap between the knowledge and actually implementation at scale, at quality, is the biggest gap and our biggest opportunity to really accelerate action on nutrition, particularly in this time where we're facing so many interlocking crises. And that given all the challenges, all the headwinds we are facing in global nutrition, we really can't afford, the people we serve cannot afford for us to keep such a long delay between evidence and action. And therefore, my third hypothesis is that implementation research, which has really been the heart of the partnership between Helen Keller International and Marie specifically and the International Food Policy Research Institute, is one way to unlock that potential for increased impact. The getting rigor about not just the what to deliver, but the how to deliver, and bringing that up and really to generate stronger evidence of how to make things work and work effectively. And for that to do, and I think this is where it's been sort of a partnership coming from different angles. Marie, this rigorous research, me, a messy program implementer, but we've actually learned to coexist quite happily. And for that to do so, I think there are 5 enabling factors. First, both institutions need to be totally dedicated that the end of the game is to make programs work better. And then the implementing partner really has to be really committed to using evidence, even evidence that's very unsettling, very unhappy, very uncomfortable to look at, and course correct to respond to that evidence. And then the research partner really needs to appreciate and value the demands and the messiness of program implementation. This is real life, and things don't always go as well as if you really have an RCT. And then fourth, that both recognize it's an iterative process that you have to course correct along the way. And that fifth, both are really understanding the value of creating national, regional, and global public goods, and that requires that you're engaging with the key stakeholders from the get-go to really make sure that any evidence being generated is really having a life beyond your own sphere of influence to influence a broader a broader community of practice, because scale is all about replication of best practices. I will call out one thing because I think otherwise Marie would kick me in the shins, even virtually, if I didn't say it. Having been on both the implementing partner side, the donor side, it does need to be funded to do this. And I do think that if we're going to get serious about on blocking the challenges to good delivery, we need to invest in making sure we're understanding what those bottlenecks are, how do we solve them, so we can move forward and impact. And my last point is not related to your question, Purnima, so much, but yes, I think it is sobering that Marie, who has been such a stalwart nutrition warrior for so long, is theoretically sort of retiring. But I think, as Marie, you said in some of your last comments, we do need to be very, very focused on generating generations of nutrition leaders who infiltrate different systems so they actually can deliver on nutrition. Thank you so much, and congratulations, Marie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shawn. Marie isn't retiring by any stretch of imagination, as far as I can tell. So we're in good stead. Namukolo, let me come to you now. You've been involved quite a bit in the policy space in your work, both nationally in Ethiopia and regionally with the African Union. And you've been part of this journey of research for policy impacts. I'm wondering, if you could focus your remarks a little bit more on the policy side of this story. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Purnima. I'm not sure if Marie will remember the first time I ever contacted her. I think it was 2009. I was teaching at Northwest University in South Africa. And I found Marie's email on a publication and wrote to her and asked her a whole bunch of questions about a publication on dietary diversity and what should we count, what must we leave out, and the like. So it was so exciting that she actually responded. So that was my beginning of the journey with Marie. Unfortunate for her, she opened a floodgate for me to keep contacting her and asking her questions all the time. And here in Ethiopia, I have some of the work that Marie talked about on nutrition-sensitive agriculture. I found myself engaging with national and policy and program processes. And I thought, what a good time to actually go back to Marie and ask her for her presentations and publications again. And I essentially would reach out to Marie and ask her to extract information from her publication, specifically on Ethiopia, so that I could be able to present that presentation to Ethiopian authorities, but bring in an element of, within this broader perspective, here is what your evidence actually looked like. And those discussions were part of consultations to inform Ethiopia's nutrition-sensitive agriculture strategy. It set the scene for additional engagements with the government stakeholders, this time around issues around food-based dietary guidelines that was led then by the Food Systems for Healthier Diets flagship of the Agriculture for Nutrition and Health program. So you can see what I'm trying to show here is interconnectivity, and that when you engage with evidence with policymakers and programs, it has to be continued and consistent engagement. You have to establish those trust relations that you can tap into subsequently. Now, we did work on developing food-based dietary guidelines in Ethiopia, and these engagements of using evidence to engage with national partners, what it led to was food-based dietary guidelines that had two objectives. One, which you would expect, looking at dietary advice for people over 2 years old. But the other, which was unprecedented, was an objective of food-based dietary guidelines that says food systems actors must do their part. And that opened a new window of opportunity of engagement on the policy space that led to engaging to influence the development of the transformation pathway that was developed. Marie also talked about the UNICEF conceptual framework of malnutrition. One of my earliest engagement with the framework was in 2011, when I was asked to speak at an African Union event where they were looking at how does nutrition fit into the agriculture space. I actually used that framework to look at entry points for nutrition sensitive interventions. And then a few years later, they published the Lancet series in 2013. So I come back again to look for information on how I could bring that into the discussions of policymakers. In those discussions, biofortification was indicated as one of the interventions, the nutrition sensitive interventions. We used that to engage with African Union processes, and long story short, we've ended up with a biofortification strategy for the African continent, a declaration in particular for the African continent, building not only on that framework, but also on the excellent work that the Harvest Plus program did at IFPRI as well. So I just wanted to give you a glimpse of the fact that over the years, I have interacted with evidence coming out of from Marie and her teams, and through my engagements with policy processes, both at country and continental levels, can be able to say some of that evidence did actually influence some policy decisions that were made, including program decisions as well. So Marie, thank you very much for your dedication, and this is not going to be the last time you hear from me. If you keep publishing, I'll keep coming to you to ask for more evidence. Thank you. Back to you, Purnima.
Thank you. Thank you, Namukolo. Anyone who has emailed Marie knows that her response time is legendary. So let me turn to you now, Omar. Can you maybe reflect briefly on, especially on USAID's use of research and programming, research in supporting programming? Sorry, thanks.
Thank you, Purnima. I was very lucky that when I started in public health nutrition, I met Marie in 1990 when she was at the Institute of Nutrition of Central America and Panama. She was my mentor and a colleague who helped me to navigate that environment. There was a colleague in that institution, one of them, who used to say, we don't need more research. We only need to apply what we already know. 35 years later, today, Marie has demonstrated us that the importance of research. We take decisions with the knowledge that we have in the moment, but eventually we realize that we were not completely right. And Marie has been honest enough to tell us that today. We need to be flexible enough to correct our approaches and try new ones with the hope that probably they are going to be better this time. USAID approach to address the consequences of malnutrition has evolved together with the science. 50 years ago, with the leadership of Dr. Martin Forman, the focus was to solve specific micronutrient deficiencies. At that time, iodine, vitamin A, and iron. We advanced in the control of the first two, but not with iron. Because during the last 20 years, we have learned that the absorption and the metabolic utilization of iron depends in the health of the host, that is the human being. If we have any type of inflammation, there is not going to be any iron intervention that is going to work. With the food crisis of 2007, the pendulum of nutrition moved to food security, and the emphasis was placed on foods, and the Feed of the Future program started. Coincidentally, we realized in the nutrition environment that our goals to reduce the high-level bioindicators of anemia, stunting, wasting, and others, we need multi-sectoral approaches because food and nutrients are going to contribute, but they, as she said, they are not sufficient. Regrettably, in the nutrition environment, we continue classifying those bioindicators as nutrition indicators, instead of indicators that reflect the integrated physical, cognitive, and social development of the human being. As we see them as consequences of malnutrition, other sectors are not perceiving the importance of their actions, leaving the challenge to be addressed to the nutritionist. It is good that we have adopted the responsibility to tackle them, and we have started to persuade others that they also need to participate. However, we need to be cautious that in the efforts of convincing others to achieve these well-being goals, we do not neglect our specific responsibilities that no one else is going to do. And for that, we need to assess and monitor and the response of intermediate indicators of those factors that help to reduce the prevalence of anemia, stunting, wasting, and other. And really, that is our responsibility as nutritionists. Last week, FAO and WHO launched the concept of healthy diets. And in my opinion, it looks very good. It includes food safety and the concepts of adequacy, balance, moderation, and diversity. Adequacy, because the diets should supply in the correct amounts, not too little, but not too much, of some essential fatty acids and amino acids, vitamins, and minerals. Balance, to keep the equilibrium of the supply of energy to respond to the energy expenditure of everyone. Moderation, because we eat not only to be nourished, but to have pleasure and to interact socially with others. But when we need to consume those products that provide us those feelings, we need to do that with moderation. And diversity, because we still don't know what good things we receive from foods, especially those coming from the plant kingdom. And breastfeeding is included in this concept because breast milk is the ideal food during the first 2 years of life and is exclusive during the first 6 months. And Ruel also works in that area. I am certain that my colleagues at USAID are going to take these concepts of healthy diets in the current discussion to update our multi-sectoral nutrition strategy. Finally, I would like to say that our functions as nutritionists is to assure that the healthy diets are for everyone, everywhere. However, this may not be realistic because ecological, economic, cultural, and metabolic constraints. This is why we still need to think to include some nutrition-specific interventions. However, those interventions must be designed to complement the healthy diets, but not to replace them, assuming that nothing else works. Before we support any intervention, we need to apply the AAA concept that UNICEF released together with divisions of the causes of nutrition in 1997, and which are do assessment, analysis, and action. Actions without assessment and analysis are going to bring us to non-intended consequences and waste the resources and time. The principles are universal, but the solutions are local. It is responsibility of the nutritionist to assess and to carry out research before and after the interventions, just as Marie has well done in all this time, to adjust those interventions to respond to the realities of each context. We need to empower the local leaderships with knowledge and critical thinking, and less with solutions, because each human community has the right to take their own educated decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Omar. Also for reminding us of the importance of the complexity of biology in how we think about this. Let me also congratulate you on a long career at USAID. I understand you will be retiring very soon as well. So thank you. Thank you, Shawn. Thank you, Namukolo. And thank you, Omar, for joining us this morning, for your tributes and your reflections that, for me, really cut across from biology to society to programs and policy and, in a sense, offered just the perfect boundaries, if you will, for the universe of the research, Marie, that you led. I'm going to invite Marie now to join us for what will unfortunately be a fairly short Q&A period, but why don't you come over and join me here, Marie? Thank you to our panelists. I'm going to pull that. Let's take a couple of questions, perhaps in the room first. Please come up to the mics if you would like to ask Marie something. Sam, introduce yourself too, please. And let's maybe take a few questions and then you can offer. Oh.
Hello? Okay.
Yes.
I'm Sam Scott. I'm a research fellow at the Nutrition, Diets, and Health Unit at IFPRI. Congratulations, Marie. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about nutrition leadership, and and I think other panelists also emphasize the importance of training and building skills. So what does that look like in terms of what can we be doing, or what are those missing skills, and just some comments on that.
Thank you, Sam. Very crisp question, absolutely exemplary. Rolf?
Yeah, Rolf Clem with Helen Keller. Some people say that researchers and policymakers live in parallel universes, just in terms of the timeliness of decisions, the kind of evidence that's needed. And I guess my question to you is, through your career, what have you learned about the policymaking process that should inform how we as researchers change or don't change the research we do so that it has greater policy impact?
Thanks, Rolf. Excellent question. Do we have any questions online? I'm not seeing them in my document. Marie, why don't you take those two while I figure out where the questions are here?
They are very difficult. In terms of nutrition leadership, I do think that, for example, we have at IFPRI a kind of system whereby relatively new in the field, people are encouraged to take more responsibilities than they might want to. We've had this big change in all of the management of IFPRI recently, and it's a new cadre of much younger people that are maybe struggling a little bit at the beginning because, I don't think they've necessarily expected it would happen so fast. And but interestingly, in terms of the leadership, when I became division director in 2004, I remember having a long, long list of questions for Joachim von Braun, and what should I learn? How do I do this? I mean, I didn't want this job, and I really didn't. I don't know how I caved in, but so he said. So I said, "You're going to have to support me," and he said, "Yes, I will," and he really did. So that means that a one-to-one person that helps you, and that you can just go and ask questions, and you can understand where they're coming from in their responses to you. But I also ask specifically for management training, and I went to Fontainebleau. That was a good choice. It was not in French, but it was a good choice. And I realized that people I was the only one who was a researcher. Everybody was from the private sector, of course. And I realized that they do that every year. They go to a training in a beautiful place for a week or two, and this is part of how they grow. And I find that in terms of us in research, there's just not a culture of that. And what you learn there has nothing to do with what you learn on the job. You just learn some principles, and you do games, and it's actually really interesting of how people relate. And so, I recommend between personal mentorship that you all know I've offered to do for the time that I stay at IFPRI. There's a value in that, and there's other people than me at IFPRI that can give personal mentorship, but also formal training. And I realize it costs money, and I don't know how we can facilitate that, but I think we should look for, and we've also had a series of CG-related management training at some point, and that was too much about the CG. So we ended up just chatting about the CG all the time, and whereas in the other one, I was very lost, and I was like, well, what do you guys do? And I had no idea what they were telling me. But it was a different world, and we need that. Management is a different world. So that's a weird answer, Sam. We can continue to talk. On how to have greater policy impacts, well, this is what I've struggled the most in preparing for this, because it's a really, really difficult area. And I kept saying collectively, because you can never say, I made this happen, or this is all because of me. This is not the point. We need to have partners. We need to work with others on making those policy changes. And I think Namukolo was explaining nicely how her presence in the ground, and people are not going to come from Ethiopia to me to ask, what would you do about nutrition-sensitive agriculture? They go to her because she's there, and that's a lot what the IFPRI model is trying to do, to have people in different regions and in different countries, and their job it continues to be some research. A lot of research continues to be done, but they spend half of their time, and Purnima could talk to that. I mean, interacting and really being there and pushing. I think that was also a model in Poshan that you used, Purnima, to push the information. They haven't asked for it, but I'll push it and I'll maybe get them interested. But it is a very difficult question.
Thanks, Marie. We're going to run out of time very, very soon. We maybe already are, but let me just ask two questions from the online, and then maybe you can be very brief in your responses. So one, and apologies to everyone online, because I'm just choosing a couple that seem particularly related to the talk. So one is on the 2013 Lancet series, said it didn't quite demonstrate strong child nutrition outcomes with nutrition-sensitive interventions. Is this still the case, and what's changed? And then the second question is about something that you talked about looking forward, and that also, Simone's lecture last year was about how concerned are you about the industry's growing influence on the global nutrition agenda? So not just on people's diets, but on the agenda setting side of things as well. Is that something we should be worried about? So if you can be brief in your responses to those, and then I'll try to close it and take us to lunch.
I think I can be brief on the second one, because I really don't know. But on the first one, I think the question relates to the kind of nutrition-sensitive programs and their impact on child nutrition outcomes, and that's a big issue, because yes, that's where we had to change our mind. And really, So we were recommending to target households that have children children that could benefit from prevention. So children, either pregnant ladies or young children, and then to provide all of those services that would address their nutrition needs. But the biggest intervention in nutrition for that child was always the behavior change communication. We're teaching mothers how to feed that child appropriately. The garden, the home garden didn't really, if you grow carrots and tomatoes, it's not really going to help the child to grow. So we were counting a lot on the behavior change communication. And that's something that I had to cut from my presentation. But the behavior change communication in all of the research we have done, and I see Leven right there looking at me because we faced so much problems with social behavior change. It is not well implemented. And it is due to the systems that often use community volunteers that have not been trained well, that are not rewarded. They don't wear a white gown. They don't look like a doctor or a nurse. They're just nobody, and they're not very good at teaching mothers how to change their practices. And so I think that if we can't fix that thing, and I really wanted to talk about it in my presentation, if we can fix the implementation of programs, we're going to have impact on children's nutritional status a lot more than we have now. But the other thing was that targeting households with young children was actually unfair to a large extent, because there's a lot of poor people that don't have children in that age group, and they would not get the program. So that's also the equity issue that made us not recommend to do that anymore, and that those programs are meant to improve diets, to improve the diets of every single member of the household. I mean, if you grow more food and if you get educated, you will have more food at home. And that may not translate immediately into the child having a better nutritional status, because the child needs a lot more. He or she needs to not be sick all the time, needs to be taken to health services, have his vaccine. So there's a lot of other things that those programs could not provide.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Marie. I think your response just really exemplifies the importance of us being utterly human-centered in how we think about programs and their impact. Well, I'm going to take this to a close now, folks. That timer is blinking hard at me. Thank you for a most, most inspiring and challenging talk. Marie, every Martin J. Forman Memorial Lecture is truly memorable, and today's will go down in archives as a very memorable one. For me, you spoke about the power of evidence itself, but in partnership with many, and the importance of the building of those partnerships. There is another hidden element of this, which will really come out if you read an evidence review on the impact of, on how research can have impact on policy. It's a review by Catherine Oliver in Nature, I believe. I highly recommend everyone reads it. But what she highlights in hers, in addition to the many elements that we talked about today, is the primacy of the quality of research. And for me and for those of us who've been privileged to inhabit your world, that is what you have exemplified in your presentation today, but really in the career that you've had, the primary principle of the highest quality of evidence. And then all the other ingredients just come together around that, right? So thank you for that, because you've brought that to the Institute, you've brought that to your partnerships, and you really brought that out in your talk today, in what you laid out for us. I want to close by offering thanks to a few people who brought this day together, to the selection committee itself, Alan, Marcia, Shawn, Mira, Kenan, Martin, and of course Charlotte. And I have the privilege of chairing that selection committee, so that's been great. I want to thank the IFPRI Communications and Public Affairs team, again, Charlotte, Mabel, Michael, Joanna, Jamed, Chris, Kate, and others in our AV team. Folks, we owe a very special thank you to James Clark, who is the head of our logistics and building team. We were going to have a fire alarm in the middle of the lecture at 10:30. You know how big a deal it is to avert that. So that's postponed. So those in the building tomorrow will be subject to that, a fire alarm drill. Thank you to the audience, and also a huge thank you to our DG, Yo Swinnen. I think every IFPRI DG embraces nutrition in different ways. Yo has been a huge supporter of that, and his patronage, if you will, also of this lecture is a big reminder of, for us of that constantly. So I welcome you all to join us for lunch outside, those of you who are in the room, and to those who are online, thank you for joining us. The lecture will remain available for people to view for a long time, looking forward. Thanks again, Marie. Thank you.